And in 3, 2, 1.
From the Fountain Ballroom in the basement of the Masonic Temple, this is your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Before us is TEDxDetroit, an event full of people looking for ideas worth spreading. We're a podcast that's about pushing Detroit's conversation forward, so let's just do that right now.
On today's show, we highlight some of the notable election results from around town. And then later, we talk with the people behind the Shout app. That's a new Detroit-based app aimed at encouraging citizen democracy. But before we get to that, a quick thank you to our members on Patreon.
Their support really matters, and your support could really too. If you decide to become a member for just a few bucks a month, join us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thank you.
We start our election roundup extravaganza in the suburb of Warren, where voters handed Mayor Jim Fouts a fourth term, despite mounting evidence in the form of audio leaks of Mayor Fouts allegedly saying racist, homophobic, and other horrible things. The 77-year-old Fouts defeated his former aide, Kelly Collegio, with 57.5% of the vote. Nearly 60% of Fouts' votes came via absentee ballots, while Collegio appears to have actually won at the polls on Election Day. Cranes, meanwhile, has a bit of egg on their face after having their own Dewey defeats Truman moment. The business publication prematurely announced that Collegio had won, and they've since issued a correction. Just under 24,000 people cast ballots in Michigan's third largest city. That represents about 24% of Warren's registered voters.
So this is one that we talked about a little bit with a Vice reporter.
Yeah.
Talking about kind of like it made national news what's been going on with Fouts and Warren, especially because it's considered a battleground important for the upcoming presidential election.
Yes.
I can't say that it's surprising that Fouts won, and he won pretty handily.
The low turnout is what kind of really jumps out at me. 24%, in an election where, there's been leak after leak after leak of Fouts. And, we should point out that Fouts has consistently denied that's him. But
the thing is about this is that there is this idea, I think, that you've either made your decision. Either you're on board or you're off board with Fouts. And I think that's the same way that it is with Donald Trump. And lots of people are on board. And I think anything that you tell them won't matter. It doesn't matter how many leaks they are. And the feedback that I got from that episode, some of the research that I've done and work like on the ground, because I've been working on stories in that part of town, that Warren, Madison Heights, Sterling Heights, that area of town, is that people have made up their minds one way or another. And to be honest, a lot of people have made their peace with it.
Yeah, and again, with 24% of people voting, given who's atop the ballot, it's hard to, conclude anything other than a lot of voters just couldn't be bothered.
Meanwhile, big upset up in Flint, where Mayor Karen Weaver narrowly lost her bid for re-election to a second term to State Representative Sheldon Neely. Weaver has been mayor since 2015 and was elected in the aftermath of the Flint water crisis. Neely is serving his third and final term in the State House and is a former Flint City Council member.
Meanwhile, let's go to Ferndale, where Melanie Piana, the former councilwoman, resigned to run for mayor, and it worked. She took nearly 2/3 of the vote, beating Brian Stawawi, who was backed by the Detroit chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. There were also 3 council seats up for grabs. Returning to council is incumbent Raylon Leaks May. She'll be joined for a full term by attorney Kat Bruner James. Meanwhile, Laura Mikulski, a business consultant and founder of the Ferndale Rat Patrol, will serve a partial term that lasts through 2021.
Sven, you're a Ferndale resident. Is there a badge for the Ferndale Rat Patrol?
It's called Ferndalian, by the way.
Oh, Ferndalian. Oh, okay. Well, are there badges for the Rat Patrol?
I don't. Apparently, there is a logo. I saw them on her campaign door hanger, which I collected several at my house, actually, and which brings me to one of my points, which is this was a hotly contested election. There were 3 seats available. 5 candidates were vying for 2 of the full term, 4-year term seats, and then there were 4 candidates for the other seat that Mikulski won, which is a 2-year term. So a lot of candidates here. I'll come back to that in a second. The mayoral race, Stowawi, we talked about it on the show last week, kind of went negative against Melanie Piana, and whether you can say that it hurt him, it definitely didn't help him. So there were, as I mentioned, a lot of candidates running this year, which is good. A lot of knocking on doors. I mean, I got lots of door hangers. Evidence that just about all the candidates came to my neighborhood, which is nice to see. But that suggests that it's democracy is sort of healthy. But I will tell you, one thing that's not healthy is local media. It's hard, I discovered this year, to find out sort of third-party information about.
And when we
these
say local
candidates,
media, hyper-local media.
like local news outlets. I got to give a shout out to website Oakland County 115, which did a really good job of getting candidate interviews, in all their coverage areas, all throughout Oakland County, and I think even into Macomb and stuff where they have bureaus. But not easy to find, again, outside of going to the candidates' websites. You always want to find like some independent stuff, like have somebody ask them questions, and it's getting harder and harder to, educate yourself as a voter.
All right, let's go west to Livonia, one of Detroit's largest suburbs, and there was a very close race for mayor there. It was a face-off between two city councilwomen, Laura Toy, a longtime elected official, member of the Donald J. Trump's women leadership team here in Michigan, and she faced off against Maureen Miller-Brosnan, a former Livonia City Council president and the executive director of the Michigan Venture Capital Association, who is said to have more progressive ideas for the city. Brosnan won by just 164 votes out of more than 24,000 cast. Incumbent Dennis Wright did not run for office. He's leaving after one term and is battling Parkinson's disease. This job in Livonia actually pays $125,000 a year.
Wow,
so this is
nice job if you can get it.
Yeah, this is more of this looks more like a big city mayorship.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the range of like what the Detroit mayor makes. This could signal the beginning of an interesting shift. I kind of want to hedge here because Livonia has not been playing with regional issues very much.
Right. Well, that's why it's interesting that somebody with, sort of more progressive leanings is taking over. Livonia, 95% white. It's one of the, whitest communities to be found in this entire region. They have for years opted out of the smart bus service, so they're like a hole in the fabric of transit coverage in the region.
Yeah, this is like in a major city. If the suburb right next to like Chicago City proper said, "Oh no, we're not going to have buses."
Yeah, and Brosnan, the winning candidate, the incoming mayor, has been one of the only council members in the past to even voice support for taking a look at adding the smart bus service.
It wasn't
back.
saying that she supported it. It's
But
that
just
she
taking a
supported
look.
taking a look at it, and she was voted down. I think this was back in 2015, 6-1.
Yeah, well, we'll take it as progress, I guess. Okay, moving over to Madison Heights, where voters overwhelmingly re-elect Mayor Brian Hartwell to another term. He got better than 83% of the vote against Jonette Wulu Eggert, who's a Liberian immigrant who was the first African-American ever to run for mayor of Madison Heights. Interesting bit of trivia there. Hartwell campaigned on hiring more public safety personnel and developing downtown Madison Heights. Where's downtown Madison Heights? I've seen him on the street signs, but I couldn't point you there.
So to me, I feel like it kind of starts at Selena's, like at 11 Mile near John R. It's that whole John R. by 11 Mile area, kind of up and down. I'm actually hoping to talk to Mayor Hartwell soon on the show. I think it would be a very interesting conversation along the lines of what you did with the city manager of Oak Park, Eric Tungate, because I think Madison Heights is a really interesting community to me. Hartwell is just 37, and that kind of signs like the signals, the changing demographics of this area. It's a lot more affordable to live in Madison Heights than it is in neighboring Royal Oak, which has just skyrocketed in land values. There's a lot more like large houses on very tiny lots in Royal Oak. Madison Heights is drawing a more diverse crowd. Royal Oak's very white. Madison Heights is drawing a lot of immigrants of various kinds.
Yeah,
a very strong Asian population of various different groups.
Yeah, like amazing diversity, ethnic diversity in the commercial district on John R. A lot of Asian markets and restaurants, Vietnamese restaurants, Chinese markets, Chinese restaurants, a couple of really good taquerias that I like to frequent.
I mean, that place, I'm keeping my eye on Madison Heights. I'm keeping my eye on Royal Oak, Hazel Park, the things happening there. One of the reasons being is that although we're seeing Detroit's comeback, we're not seeing young people in that energy unless they're in the very high end, the 1% move into the city, because there aren't the spaces, the tax. And on top of that, you've got very high taxes, and the car insurance fix that was passed in Lansing is not a fix. It only takes off a small percentage. So that's not going to actually help keep people stay in the city. So what I'm really seeing from our listeners too, and talking to them, is people are choosing the Livonias, the Madison Heights, the Ferndales, Hazel Parks, Warren, inner ring suburbs where they can actually live on the salaries that they make, because a lot of folks who used to look at Detroit, they're very much put off by the extremely high rents and the red tape and the car insurance.
Moving forward here, Highland Park residents voted for district representation on city council for the first time. Previously, all council members were at-large candidates. For this election, Highland Park divided into 3 districts. A 4th council member will still serve at large. I feel like Highland Park is another city that has a lot of potential. It's definitely got some major challenges, a lot of blight and poverty, principally. But it's, as they say, it's got good bones. There are some blocks, residential blocks that have maintained, have kind of held on and have some beautiful homes.
Oh, and you have some innovative projects. That's where Mama Shoe is.
Yep.
Over there that we visited. And now that I live kind of, just a few blocks away from Highland Park, I've really gotten to see it in a different kind of light. I think the place has a lot of potential, and I think that
it's a great location. Woodward runs right through it.
Well, and it being smaller, it's able to control its own destiny a little bit better than a sprawling city like Detroit. All right, let's go back up Woodward a little bit to Royal Oak. Voters chose all incumbents to return to serve for another term. They were challenged by a citizens group who took issue with the awarding of contracts without opening them up to bidding. Let's go back up Woodward really quick. Voters chose all incumbents to return to serve for another term up there in Royal Oak. They were challenged by a citizens group who took issue with the awarding of contracts without opening them up to bidding. Mayor Michael Fournier is going to be serving another term. He's somebody that has taken Royal Oak in much more of an urbanist direction.
And finally, over in Eastpointe, the mayorship was decided by just 19 votes. And council member Monique Owens narrowly beat Mayor Pro Tem Michael Kleinfeld for the seat. Eastpointe, interestingly, used a ranked choice voting this year to choose council candidates. It was part of a settlement of a federal lawsuit alleging discrimination against black voters. So on Tuesday, voters were asked to rank their 4 candidates from first through 4th choice. The candidate with the fewest first choice votes was eliminated. Then second choices are added and counted, and it goes on until there are 2 candidates with more than a third of all votes.
Eastpointe is another place going through a lot of change, especially demographically, and it's interesting to see them wrestle with this.
And fittingly for a show that's all about election returns, our next guests are the co-founders of a new app called Shout, which is aiming to boost citizen participation in democracy. Co-founders are Colleen Martin and Saharsh Hajela. And welcome to Daily Detroit, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Right. So you guys are here with your table displaying at TEDxDetroit here at the Masonic Temple. Tell us about Shout app. What exactly does this allow you to do?
Yeah, so Shout is a mobile app that takes the concept of 20, 30 people representing you, all with a different website and phone number and email address, and condenses it into one place where all you have to do is put in your address, and Shout will give you a comprehensive list from the top down of your president, your senators, your House of Representatives person, your state representatives, and so on and so forth, down to your governor, your city council person, your city transportation commissioner, so that you don't have to worry about putting in all of the research and the time and the energy into looking these people up. Mm-hmm. You just have to focus on what you want to say and when you want to say it.
That's so cool. And then so it allows you to actually communicate with them as well, is that right?
Yeah, so it provides their email, their phone number, their Twitter if they have an account, so you can immediately contact them right there.
Through the app? Or does it take you through like email and things like that?
So you'll select which option, and then it'll take you to an email account, but it'll also record that message that you're sending via email onto the Shout app. So it holds that political representative accountable for what they're sending. So all the people in your region can see what you sent them.
Right. Tell us about how the company and the app got started.
Yeah, so actually last November, I found out that it was still legal in our state to be fired for being gay. And that was not something that I personally loved. So I wanted to talk to somebody in government about my concerns and figure out who was best for that. And the whole process was essentially a nightmare, right? You have to figure out who's the person in charge of the bill, who could bring it to the table, et cetera, et cetera. And it was, so mind-numbingly painful of a process that I almost gave up.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of decided that someone had to do something about it, right? It should be way easier. These are people who their title literally says representative, right? But the last thing that some of them are doing is representing us, the people. So I called up Colleen and I was like, we need to change this.
Right.
And that's how Shout was born. It's one place where you are represented by the people who are supposed to.
Right. And so who are you guys? I mean, like you guys are both young, quite a bit younger than me, but I mean, do you work in technology? Do you have a background in coding and things like that? Or
We're both technology people, I would say. We were in school together and we graduated, and I'm working.
Where'd you go to school?
U of M in Ann Arbor.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working in hardware right now in the automotive industry. And Saharsh?
Yeah, so I worked for a while on an international data system thing. I guess it's not important, but I have a professional history in.
It's always important. Man. Don't belittle yourself.
I have a professional history in software development, but now I work on Shout full time. So I'm one of the full time developers.
Although we didn't have application experience, so we each made one of the apps. I did the Android and Saharsh did the iOS. So we totally learned that from scratch.
And so your offices here in Detroit, in the suburbs somewhere, or out in Ann Arbor? Where are you?
We're a grow at home business.
You're in the cloud.
Yes, yes, exactly. We're in the cloud. So I work out of Ann Arbor, and Colleen works out of her place in
Yeah, I'm
Berkeley.
in Berkeley right now.
Okay, cool. And so when did you launch?
We launched on the App Store mid-September this year, so like literally
new.
less than 2 months ago. Yeah, and we're still releasing plenty of updates. We try and do one every 2 weeks, but we're working on some big things that we're really excited about. So there's a little bit of a delay right now.
Are you able to maybe foreshadow some of those big things a little bit? Like what's next? Where are you going with this?
Sure. So right now, anybody in the country can download Shout and use it to find their representatives and contact them inside the app through email, phone, Facebook, or social media. But what we're working on, we've done some interviews with people who've used the app, and they said, this is so great. Not to toot our own horn, but that's what they said. They said, this is so great, but it's hard to keep up with all the stuff that's going on. Normally, I rely on, a newsletter or a mail that's sent to me, but when that happens, right? So if Colleen and I run an organization that says, endthepotholes.com, and we send out a weekly newsletter to everyone who follows us that says, hey, contact Joe Schmo. He's in charge of all these potholes. He has to know about them. When someone gets a newsletter like that, that piece of information is so far removed from what the action you really have to take is, right? You have to get the email, open the email, which a lot of advocacy groups struggle with just getting email opens.
Yeah.
And then figure out, all right, now I got to get on my phone and put in the number and all this stuff. It creates such a long chain of events that people get discouraged and they don't follow through on the things that they're passionate about. So what we're doing is we're working with advocacy groups in Michigan right now to create a platform where you could follow endthepotholes.org on Shout, and instead of them sending you a letter in the mail or a newsletter you're not going to open, they can send you a push notification that says, hey, new pothole on South State Street and Liberty, and then you open the notification and at the bottom it'll say something like, endthepotholes.org recommends that you shout Joe Schmo about this issue. And right there, when you read that, you can call him, email him, tweet him, add him on Facebook.
That really sounds like it shifts it from being not just a directory tool, but an advocacy tool.
That's correct.
Definitely. Yeah, we're trying to get organizations involved. Like we're working with a climate organization and another one in Michigan that's they're taking recycling out of some of the lakes in Michigan and turning it into clothing that they're selling. So we're working with these types of organizations where they can also send push notifications for them to contact their officials, but they can also request help for community events. So you can start to take action immediately.
All right, so I mean, you guys are young guns working on this app. Saharsh, you're working on it full time. Are you guys do you guys want to keep it here in Michigan and Detroit area, or are you gonna, take venture money and move out to Silicon Valley one day?
Well, I mean, we'd love to expand, but we're definitely trying to focus here and create like a very, very strong base here. We've worked a lot with advocacy groups at U of M's campus in Ann Arbor, and in the Detroit area now we're expanding more across Metro Detroit. But we're really trying to establish a very strong base here before we start to spread. But we have seen users all over, like a couple different states all over the country, since they can use it right now.
Mm-hmm.
We just haven't focused on marketing to those.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating idea and seems really clever. I'm excited to try it out. You can learn more at theshoutapp.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Colleen Martin and Saharsh Hajela from Shout App. Thanks for coming by and talking to us about it.
Thanks
Thank
so
you guys
much.
so much. Appreciate it.
And that'll do it for today's episode from TEDxDetroit at the Masonic Temple. We recorded some other conversations here at the conference that we will trickle out in future episodes, so look for those.
One of them I'm very excited about is we have the voice of Yakko. And a Michigander, in fact, Rob Paulson. So I'm pretty excited. Look for that in your feed soon.
A good conversation for sure.
Absolutely. Also, thanks here to Terry Bean, Stephanie Casola, Jason Brown, and all the media folks here at TEDxDetroit over here. It's been great having a stage in the Fountain Ballroom. It's been crazy. This is our first stage show.
Yes, indeed.
Well, if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend about Your Daily Detroit. It's really the best way to push Detroit's conversation forward. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
Also, Mayor Ron, not Ron. Is it Ron Fournier?
I think it's Michael.
Michael, not Ron. Ron works at Mayor Ron Fournier. That's going into the extra, Shy. Mayor Ron Fournier.